And we are live. Hello, adventurers. That's how we start. Well, actually, we started with "Hey, adventurers," but that's all right. I don't know exactly how long we'll be going for this, or what exactly we will be doing, and I don't know if anybody's here yet. But in a yeah, I'll give about 5 minutes, and then or not 5 minutes, a couple minutes, and then we'll see what happens.
When
Liam's here.
When we were discussing what to talk about, and you mentioned that we were going to be speaking on some of these books a little bit more, I panicked a little bit because it's been a long time since I've read some of these, and I have to talk about a book about a week after I finish it before I forget things. So
yeah,
my memory's not fresh. The benefit is we're choosing very influential books to us. So
yeah. No, they were. So my goal with them when I was choosing was picking books that are not necessarily the books that I think are the absolute best, but the ones that, for whatever reason, when I read them, I had the best reading experience with them, or liked them the best, or whatever. However that works. So we'll see what I come up with. Go ahead.
I also thought it was really interesting choosing books from 2020 and 2021 was a lot easier than 2022 because 2022 was twice as long as both the other years for my reading list.
Yeah, me too. I had the exact same issue, 2022, and it just choosing books for this third year that we were in was just not as hard. It took a lot more. I can't. My brain shut off. That's all right. So I guess we'll just start out introducing ourselves since we always forget to do that in the actual videos. I'm T. I primarily run the channel. That's I do most of the editing. I do most of the videos. And it's just the way that it's worked out, and it's worked out pretty good so far. So
and that's who we are. Useless sidekick.
Well, if you want to look at yourself that way, that's fine. But that's all right. So the goal of this stream, it is a third anniversary or BookTube birthday celebration video. So we're just kind of we wanted to celebrate that in some way. And what the idea that came to my mind was that of it's been 3 years, so let's pick 3 books from each of the past 3 years. And so that's kind of what we decided on. We each have books. I don't know. I'll have to look at my phone in order to figure out what the order is that I pulled them in. A couple of them I don't have the physical book for. One or two of them I don't have the physical book for. But that's all right. I guess we can get started. Thank you, Liam.
Yeah, it's the anniversary of our BookTube channel.
Yeah, actually it was the 16th, but we didn't want to do a live stream on Thursday, so that's all right. Yeah, so the first book that I did in year 1, which was 2020, I believe. Yeah, 2020. I don't know how you ended up separating your years out. I ended up doing 2020, 2021, and 2022, not March through March, March through March, March through March. So
I don't have that designated in my books anyways, so I could do that if I wanted to.
So I just ended up going by year, and that's fine. But anyways, the first one that I have on that I listed for year 1 is The Way of Kings by, let's see, this side has more space, by Brandon Sanderson. This is Stormlight book 1. I really like, when we started in BookTube, I already owned the first 3 Stormlight books, and I hadn't read them yet. I'd read Mistborn, I'd read Elantris, and that's it of Sanderson's, I believe. But oh no, that's not true. I'd read Mistborn, Era 1 and Era 2. And then I hadn't read my brain is not flowing right now. I hadn't read Way of Kings yet, so I picked that one up. I think that was towards that was like April or something of 2020, and I read it. And part of what made me love it or choose this book was the experience of physically reading it and going through it and having to just slog through the pages and pages of text where, I mean, there's stuff going on constantly, and the book is fast paced and really nice on that end. But there is just a lot of pages and a lot of words. But it was just a great experience reading it physically. And my edition, my copy of it, I guess, has somewhere in it. It's got, I think it's this one. It might be my copy of Words of Radiance, but I think it's my copy of Way of Kings has some sections where it's missing the pages, or it repeats other pages. And so I had to go get the audiobook for it and find those sections and listen through those sections. But just the whole experience of reading it and reading another Sanderson and another epic fantasy series that I really do like, Stormlight, especially the first two books. So that's kind of why I chose this first one. Thank you. Thanks for joining.
So I chose The Book Thief for my first book and my first year. I've always loved historical fiction, but it took me probably until we started getting into BookTube to figure out that that was a genre I particularly liked. And this was one of the first books I read in that year. I mean, this is not a little known book. The Book Thief is really popular. It does have a very specific style throughout it that tends, and so I find that people tend to either really like it or they have a really hard time just getting into it. Some people don't finish it, or some people just really don't like it. So it seems to be one of those polar opposite types of books, as in people either love it or hate it. And I really loved it. It affected me emotionally, which I love in a story, and it had the historical fiction, and it came from a different perspective than a lot of World War II historical fiction does. So that was just something that was really cool to me. And I realized, or I was thinking about it, there was one scene in the book that was very vivid in my mind, and I actually sketched it out, and I'm not good at sketching, but sometimes I do it for fun. And I sketched it out, and so when I think of this book, that sketch now comes to my mind as well.
Okay, my second one, second book for year one is Gathering Blue, which is the second book in the Giver Quartet by Lois Lowry. This is one where I read The Giver in, I don't know, I was probably 12 when I read it or something like that. And I've read The Giver since then 3 times before, or 2 times. Let's see. I'd read The Giver, and then I'd read it once when in school, and then I read it before I read Gathering Blue. But Gathering Blue, it was so much very different from The Giver in many ways, but it used colors in a way that basically anytime there's any sort of color or light magic in a story, I absolutely love it. And this isn't so much magic as it is artistry. And just the way that color was used in that book, it was a great story, and I just really latched onto it for that reason. But I also I read over half of it one day. We went out and sat by a river and were just having fun, and I was sitting at the river reading the book, and then I finished the book the entire way. So that was part of why I just absolutely loved Gathering Blue. Matt popped in. He says, "Wait, hold up. The Giver is more than one book. It ends on such a good spot. That's super surprising to me." And he says his mind's blown. Yeah, so The Giver is, there's 4 books in the Giver Quartet. That's why it's called the Quartet. But it's only, they don't really connect that directly with one another. The 4th book does connect them a little bit more, but other than that, it was just kind of The Giver is a standalone in many ways, and it works really good as a standalone.
They're all set in the same world, which I think is the main tie-in for them.
Yeah,
I
pretty
mean,
much.
there are some, I don't know, there's some characters that tie in. Well, we can say that.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, I think it's a pretty common one to have to read in school, and I think it's a good one to read in school, actually. Much like, I guess I haven't read 1984 yet, but I feel like that's another one that's very similar it's very heavy on themes, and it's very dystopian. And I think both of those, I think that's probably why they are so heavily recommended for reading in school. But what's your second one?
Yeah. So my second one is Salt to the Sea by Rudis Petties. Once again, this is me discovering that I really, really love historical fiction. And I discovered Rudis Petties in her writing, and I've now read everything she's published, I believe. I'll have to double check that. I've read all of her popular books that she's published. This one in particular is my favorite. It's about the tragedy that was 6 times deadlier than the Titanic, and the Titanic is something that's always fascinated me. So this synopsis, which is what I just read off the back here, caught my eye, and I loved it from cover to cover. So it's set in 1945. It's a really great story. It follows a couple different characters and their influence, or the influence the world had on their lives, which, I mean, of course, that affected everybody, but their stories were very unique, and I think Rudis Petties did a great job of telling them.
Continuing on with the chat of the giver, Matt says, I think it's the first more adult-oriented school book that I absolutely loved. And yeah, I agree. I don't know. There's just something about the giver that's like haunting almost. It's because you can see how the world could get to that point very easily, and it's scary because of that. Liam's never read The Giver, and I think that he should. I think he'd appreciate it. He may not enjoy it as much as I do, but I think he'd really appreciate a lot of what it does. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, so I think you need to read it. And it's short. The Giver, the 4th book, Sun, is like 300 pages. All the other ones are significantly less than that. They're like 150 to 200 pages maybe. So they're very short novels, but filled with themes, and it's amazing. The third one that I've got in year 1 is Dawn of Wonder by Jonathan Renshaw, and I have talked about this book a lot on the channel. Well, in terms of how many books I've read while on the channel, I've talked more about this than probably anything except Tolkien. So, but yeah, I love Jonathan Renshaw. Sure, he's only written one book, or he's only published one book. That's Dawn of Wonder here. It's a high fantasy, epic fantasy story, but it is a coming of age in many ways, but it's not YA. A lot of times it does follow a teenage protagonist, but it's not YA, and it doesn't deal with the teenage angst and drama. There is a little bit of that in it, but for the most part, it's an epic fantasy series, and it deals actually with domestic violence is the primary heavy adult theme that it deals with. But there's a lot of other stuff in it, a lot of coming of age in it, and it's really cool, the world that's set up. I absolutely love Renshaw's writing. Very, very descriptive, very vivid in his descriptions. I have reread Dawn of Wonder once now. I read it physically the first time and listened to it the second time last year. And so the first time I read it, all I could think about after reading it was just the mental images that I had from some of the sequences that happened. They were just so vivid in my mind, and I could see the clouds rolling back and the stars appearing, and just like the way that it was described, I couldn't get that out of my mind, and that's part of why I love it. But it's also just a phenomenally well-written book, and it's not without its issues. I'm sure Kate has more issues with it than I do, but I just really liked Dawn of Wonder. And Liam, he won a giveaway for this book from us, and he hasn't read it, which I completely understand. There's a ton of books that I've gotten that I haven't read yet. But
so the third book that I read was this was our 2020 year, and I guess this is wrapping up the 2020 books here. So it's Romanov by Nadine Brandes, and I don't know, this was such a great book. It's hard to pinpoint the things I loved about it. It's historical fiction. I don't know if that's the only genre that fits it. It has magic in it. So it's more than just historical fiction, but it follows the Romanov family and specifically Natasha. I'm sorry. Natasha? I don't know. I'll have to find that out in a second here. But it follows the Romanov girl, the one that I'm talking about. And I really enjoy the story overall. It has a really strong family theme, and the ending is tragic but hopeful at the same time.
Anitha says, happy BookTube birthday, guys. Thank you, Anitha. So moving into, moving into year 2, which is 2021. The first book and this is the first one that I don't physically have, but that's the Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. This is one that Kate and I both buddy read it with Ramsey from Rajathon. And that was it's the first buddy read, first collaboration that we ever did on the channel. And it was just a super fun experience. And for me, at least, I really enjoyed the book. I listened to the book. I was off. I didn't have work or it was like in between work and school, in between school ending and work starting for me, that I listened to it. And so I just sat around the house, not sat around, I worked on things around the house, but I just constantly, pretty much 24/7 while I was listening to it, had the book going on. And it was just amazing. It was such an engrossing story. And I don't know, I had an amazing time listening to the book, and I don't have a physical copy of it yet, and I really need to get one.
So the first book in 2021 for me was Dust by Kara Swanson. This is a Peter Pan continuation, so it's not a retelling in the sense that it's not telling the story of Peter Pan we know. It's picking up from the story of Peter Pan that we know. And it's following a girl named Claire, and she's dealing with a lot. She's looking for her lost brother, very alone in the world and dealing with some difficult emotions and difficult mental issues and or mental struggles, I think is a better way to put it. And she bumps into Peter Pan, and her whole world changes. And it's a very, very dreamy and Neverland-esque book, even if we don't see a lot of Neverland in this particular book. Most of it's set in London. So it does have multiple point of views. You follow Claire, you follow Peter Pan, and I think maybe a couple other characters in the story. But there was a couple particular instances that resonated with me, things like friends from the internet and stuff like that. So very modern, not retelling, a very modern interpretation of Peter Pan.
I like that name. Punk Rock Cereal Bowl says Count of Monte Cristo is a banger, and yes, I agree. It absolutely is. All right, what have I got? So this book, the second book that I have for year 2, which is 2021, is A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. This is the first book in the Lady Trent Memoirs series. It's a 5-book series. All 5 of the books are amazing, but this first one is the only one that I read physically. It's the only one that I had physically, and so it's the only one that I read physically. The other ones they're narrated by Kate Redding, and she does a great job as well. Fits the tone and the voice of this character very, very well. But this book, part of why I was so drawn to it was the title, A Natural History of Dragons, and then part of it was just this cover, which is just an illustration of a dragon. I don't know how well you can see it, the rest of it, but there is some little anatomical breakdown lines. They're numbered. They're lines pointing to certain things that are numbered, and they're not named what they are. But I went into this book hoping for a very scientific story, and that's not what it was. It was a very a memoir, a look back on her first adventure, on Lady Trent's first adventure, and it was so good. It wasn't what I expected or what I was hoping for, but even in that, I still enjoyed what it was and appreciated what it was doing. There's a lot of great illustrations all throughout the books, all throughout all of the books. You get a dragon right there, just a lot of beautiful dragons. And if you know me, I like dragons. So it just, the experience of reading it, having all the illustrations that I could look at as we were going through, reading this story that was just very engrossing and very intriguing story. There's a lot of mystery elements in this first book. I just really liked this book, and I was so excited to continue the series whenever I could, and it took a while to get to it. Liam says, I still need to read Count of Monte Cristo unabridged in English. Does that mean that you've read it in French? And Derek says, that's a nice illustration. Yeah, I agree. I love the illustrations. I think, so who did the illustrations to this? And it was Scott Lockwood, I believe. And he just did such a great job with all the illustrations in this series. There might be somebody else who did some of the maps and stuff, but for the most part, I believe it was mostly Lockwood. And they're just absolutely beautiful. Very, very pretty books. And I have one in hardback. I still don't have book 5. Heavily abridged version in French. Yeah. I feel like there's so much, I don't know how you would abridge that book, because there's so much in it that ties together, and by removing any parts of it, you remove the complexity of the story, the purposeful complexity of it. And I don't know if it would, I guess I'd have to read an abridged version to see what I thought.
So the next book I've got for this 2021 we're in here. It's Dark Disciple by Christy Golden. This is a Star Wars book, and I'm what I would consider a passive Star Wars fan, so I like the original trilogy and the 3 sequels, so the first 6 movies, and I never watched a lot of Clone Wars, but this book follows Asajj Ventress and Quentin Voss, I believe is the Jedi's name.
Quinlan?
Yeah. Okay. I got it, though. Quinlan Voss, and not knowing these characters, or knowing very little of Asajj Ventress and knowing nothing of Quinlan Voss, I was very interested in this story. I really like reading Star Wars that's set in the world, but not with the characters we know from the movies, because I don't like how they're written in books, just in general. I really love this one, and it deals with a specific area of the Force, which I can't remember the name of right now. T might have it, but anyhow, it was so fascinating following these 2 characters through their adventure. I believe they're trying to find Count Dooku or assassinate him. I can't remember. It's been so long since I read it. I do recall thoroughly loving this book. I actually read probably the last half of it in one sitting. I was waiting for my car somewhere. So really great story. That's Dark Disciple by Christy Golden, and I really haven't read that many Star Wars books, and so I was surprised as I was reading through my list of 2021 that this one stood out to me so much, but it did. So, did you find that ability?
It's Force precognition is part of it, but that's not the one. Most Jedi have precognition to some degree. I'm trying to find it's. I know it's right there, but I can't think of what it is. It's psycho. I could explain exactly what it is. It's when you touch something and you can see the history of it through the Force. Mm-hmm. And I cannot remember what the Force ability is actually called. Psychometry is what's sticking in my head, but that doesn't sound right.
I could probably find it while you do your next book.
Yeah, go ahead and try. Maybe let's see. Psychometry, I was right. Yeah. Known as one of those, yeah. I know way too much about Star Wars. let's answer some comments before I move on. I feel like Quinlan Vos had a very limited role in the Clone Wars. So cool that there's more of him out there. Yeah.
He was in like one episode, right? Or two, maybe? Yeah, just one? Because after I read the book, I went and found the episodes with Quinlan Vos and with
there's 3. I think because it's a 3-arc series or 3-arc episode. I think with Quinlan Vos and Obi-Wan, maybe only 2 episodes. But since Echo, Force Echo, since Echo, or Psychometry, but yeah, all of them. Yeah, that's absolutely what they called it in Jedi Outcast or the Fallen Order. It's the I don't know. Actually, I haven't played Jedi Outcast. In Fallen Order, the character has Cal Kestis has the same ability. It's a very rare Force ability. I know too much about Star Wars, but it's a really cool Force ability as well. Very powerful if you actually can control it in the way that some of these characters can. So, all right, what's the next one? My next one. Oh, right. So in the last book that I had for 2021, this was. So if you know me, you know that I like dragons, I like Lord of the Rings, I like Star Wars, and I like Arthurian. And so in the end of 2021, I took an Arthurian literature class. It was a English. I think it was actually a medieval literature class, but we focused on Arthurian literature. That was kind of what the class was supposed to be, and so a lot of it we the students got to choose what we read. But the one that we didn't get to choose, the one that was like, all right, we are going to read this book for sure, was Le Morte d'Arthur by Sir Thomas Malory. And I love this book. This is kind of I have it in 2 editions, the Penguin edition that splits it up into 2 because it's a very big book. But I loved this book. It kind of tells all the stories, all the quintessential Arthurian tales are all combined into one, especially the ones heavily concerning Arthur. There is an overarching storyline throughout the entire books, or throughout this entire book. So it does kind of feed into itself as you continue through and tells an epic tale, but it also just tells the stories as it comes to them and says, all right, we need to tell the story of Balin and Balin now. And it's like my favorite 2 characters. The Knight of Two Swords is a lot of times people know that story as, but it's like a tragedy. Obviously, I like tragedies, so that's that's part of why I love that story. But there's so many other stories throughout here. We learn there's the Grail quest is in here. We've got the Sword in the Stone. We've got the Lady of the Lake. Just kind of all of the Arthurian stories. This is kind of what we think of when we think of the canon of Arthurian literature. And there's not really an actual canon, but this is kind of what people look to as this is the compilation of most of them. And it's very good. It's a bit archaic in its writing, but I don't have any issue with that. I like older writing styles. I like older English. It's not Old English. That's actually a modernized Middle English. It's Le Morte was written in Middle English, and the Penguin edition that I have is a translation essentially of a very, very modern, or a very, very late Middle English into a more modern English. But I don't know. I really like that one. So that's the last book that I've got. And last thing, yeah, Fallen Order. Perfect. Go for it.
Alrighty. So my last book for 2022, are we in? Yeah, at these years. No, 2021.
2021. Yep.
Okay. Is Zorro by Isabel Allende. I grew up watching the Mask of Zorro movie, and I believe I watched some of the TV show, but not as much of that. So I didn't realize it was a book for a long time, and I saw this at the thrift store. I decided to read it, and I really loved it. It has the pacing is a little bit weird, so it'll be really fast paced for a while, and then really slow paced, and then pick up the pace again, fast and slow, and go back and forth. And typically, I really just like books like that. They fall in my mind, they fall more under the category of an epic tale in the sense that it's taking a long time. And this follows Zorro, or Diego de la Vega, from his infancy all the way to his time when he becomes Zorro. So it spans a long time, and it's not all fast-paced. But despite that, I really, really liked it. And most books, when they have those qualities of that slow pacing or that uneven pacing, I don't typically enjoy it. This one worked really well for me. I love seeing the childhood to the person he becomes and all the things that influenced him and brought him to that point in his life. It's very fascinating. Plus, seeing the world in which he lives, in which he plays Zorro, as in the book, is so different from what we saw, what I saw in the little bit of The Mask of Zorro. This is definitely better than that movie, even though I have a lot of nostalgic, pleasant feelings for that film.
I think it was Return of Zorro that we watched.
Return of Zorro? Are you?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever watched Mask of Zorro.
A minute ago, because I actually wanted The Mark of Zorro. Nope. No, yeah, I think it's The Mark of Zorro.
Maybe it's The Mark of Zorro. But it's not Mask. That's a different one. That's
okay.
Passing the Torch, I think.
I did try and look it up before I said it. And
maybe it is. Maybe it's The Legend of Zorro.
Anyhow, I don't know. What we read, what I watched a lot of was The Mark of Zorro.
Anyways, we can continue on now.
On to the next year.
Now we're in 2022, and actually this was the very first book that I finished in 2022, and that was To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is one that I did listen to the audiobook. I didn't read the physical book for this one, but all throughout my life, I'd heard how much I need to read To Kill a Mockingbird, and I've known so much about it without knowing really anything about it. Actually, I didn't know what the story was. I knew there was something about about rabies and dealing with that, and I knew there was a court case, and I knew the characters' names, but I really didn't know anything about what the story was or what they were trying to say with the story or anything like that. And I'd seen people watching the movie. It had been playing in my house when I'd go see scenes of it play out or whatever, but I'd never actually watched the movie, so I never knew really anything about the book. And somehow I made it all the way through my schooling without having to read it either. So then I finally was like, all right, I just need to read this book. And so I listened to it, and it was amazing. I don't even know what it was that stood out so much about it to me, but I love historical fiction. I don't even know that this would be considered historical fiction, but it's the way that the story was told, following scouts. I think it's only like 3 or 4 years. I think it spans about 3 or 4 years of her life. I don't remember, but it's just everything about it. It was exactly what everybody said it was supposed to be and how good it was. And so it was kind of one of those things where I didn't think a book that was as hyped as this book could be as good as it was. And then it was. And so, yeah.
I am drinking a Rooibos chai tea right now. It's a loose leaf blend. I've become obsessed with loose leaf tea because it's so much better than bagged. So I'm going to do some quick lighting adjustment before I do my next book here.
All right. So we are almost through, actually. I don't know how long we'll go, obviously, until we're done with our books, but I don't know if we'll go terribly long after that. I know that I am planning to go watch the Happy Little Mapsidents with Andrew D. Meredith, on which it starts in 2 hours. About
starts an hour and a half. Wait, an hour and a half.
Oh, maybe it is an hour. Yeah, that's right, an hour and a half. But I've been having lots of fun with that, drawing maps and everything, and so I'm excited to get back to it. There was two or 3 weeks where he was part of I think it was 2 weeks. One of them was a big Lord of the Rings watch along that they were doing, and I didn't get to take part in that, but I did hop in and listen to their thoughts as they were watching through it a little bit and commented, and so that was fun. But I'm excited to get back to actually working on maps and learning how to draw maps and stuff because I love fantasy maps.
Yeah, it is a very delightful tedium. So the next book. Oh, is it my turn for book or your turn?
Yeah, it's your turn.
Okay. So for 2022, which was last year, one of my top books was Dracula by Bram Stoker, and I did not really think I would love Dracula this as much as I did, but I decided I wanted to read it, and I got the audiobook. And I got about to the halfway point, and it got really dark, and I wasn't sure if I was going to finish it, if I was going to like it, because the world seemed so dark and so hopeless. But it was an audiobook, so it's an easy thing to get through. I persevered, and I'm really glad because the way that the story turns around and the heroism that you see in the story is really unparalleled in many, many books. I love how the light shines through in a very dark world. I thought that the vampire would be very, I mean, the vampire is very romanticized adventure-wise in today's and the more modern term of romanticism in today's society. And I wasn't really interested in that, but Dracula's not like that, not in the same way. So it was a really, really great read. There we go, Dracula. Have you read this one yet, T?
No, I have not. It's one of those ones that I'll get to sometime.
I wasn't. It was funny. So my mom likes a lot of the same classics that I like. Well, maybe that's not true. Anyhow, I thought that she had loved Dracula, and so I went into it knowing that my mom liked it, which is part of why I read it through. And then when I went and told her, hey, I just finished Dracula, she said, I hated that. I couldn't get through it. I couldn't get past the middle. It got so dark. So, yeah, it's an interesting.
Oh, you just missed most of the books. That's all right.
Just all the books. That's all.
Liam says he's romanticized in the grotesque sense the movement brings.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Is Carmilla is that a character in Dracula, or is that a different book about a vampire? I feel like I should know this. In the exotic sense too. He's romanticized in the exotic sense too, I suppose.
I can't answer if it's a character because I honestly can't remember any character names besides. There was a Dr. John, I think. But
I did, yes. I did talk about Dawn of Wonder. You'll have to go back and watch it to hear my thoughts. But a little bit more speaking on Dawn of Wonder. So Bryn made me read the book. So that's why she's asking about it. But
yeah,
she did
read the book too.
So, yeah.
And back to the Dracula.
If I can get it to pop up. There we go.
There we go.
Carmilla is a vampire book from a couple decades before Dracula. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'll have to look into that as well. So that's Dracula's kind of hailed as like the start of the vampire thing and everything like that. And it's interesting. It's always interesting when you find books that are before that come out before, that were written before something like Dracula. That's the famous one. That's the well-known one.
One thing I did know about Dracula is the audiobook I was listening to had a foreword that spoiled the entire book for me. And I didn't know that. I was driving listening to the audiobook, so it wasn't like a situation where I could skip ahead very safely. So I did have an idea of what I was getting into just because of that foreword. But I still liked the book overall.
I hate when classics do that, and they do it all the time because there's been so many essays and studies and stuff done on the books, and then they just like stick all the information in the forward, and you're like, thanks. Hopefully everybody's read it. Yeah. Put it after.
Or at least, I don't know. I understand in a physical copy you can skip past it, but in an audiobook it was very frustrating to me.
Yeah. The Vampire by Polidori is even older. It came out around Frankenstein's release. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Hasn't read it yet. Yeah. No kidding. Even the Lord of the Rings does it because there's a foreword written by Tolkien that spoils a lot of the Lord of the Rings before you get into the prologue. But it's just like come on, guys. It's if you've already read the book, it's great because then you can get a refresh and be like, oh yeah, I can look for this and watch for this as I'm going through it. But if you haven't read the book, it just spoils it for you. And it's so easy to go into classics knowing nothing about them because nobody talks about them unless it's in a school setting and you're actually reading them. And it's just, I don't know. What's the next book that I've got? Oh, another one that Bryn made me read, and that is Activated by Nova McBee. So this is actually the third book in the Calculated series. Calculated, I didn't love on my first read through of Calculated, and Simulated, the sequel, I also was like, I'm not sure that this is going to be the series for me. I love the world, and I enjoyed the characters, and I enjoyed the abilities and stuff. A lot of the stuff that was in the book was what made me want to read the book, not the story itself. But then I read Activated, and Activated, I actually really, really like the story in this one, and the characters and everything that I found really good about the first two books was in this book, and everything that I didn't love initially on that first read through was fixed in this book. And so it was kind of just like almost a perfect third book for a series, and it's not the end of there's a book 4, so that hasn't been written or hasn't been released yet. It's been written, waiting for a release date to finally get announced, but it hasn't yet. But I'm super excited for this. These are also getting adapted. Calculated is the script has gone through several rewrites at this point, and they're very close to actually starting filming on that, and then they'll do the sequels after they do the first book. But Activated it, of the 3, I can't really talk much about the story in Activated because it's spoilers for the first 2 books.
Yeah.
But I really love it.
No, it's such a great series, and you'll have to bear with me because I just finished Activated, and it really stands apart from the rest of the series. And I loved Calculated. Simulated wasn't my favorite, but Activated is just blows you away. And I have yet to meet someone who's read it who doesn't agree that it's just the best book in the series, that the story is unlike any of the others, and is just really, really fantastic.
And it is YA. It's absolutely YA, but it's
in the best way possible.
It's like you have the stigma against YA or the stereotypes that for YA and everything, and they're all there, but most of the time they're done better, and like they're well done. The stereotypes are well done rather than just there for the sake of being there, and that in and of itself makes me enjoy it a lot more. But I do still like a lot of the YA books. I mean, I still really enjoy the Hunger Games series. I think that they're way better than people give them credit for. As I already mentioned, The Giver, Quartet, I've really enjoyed. I actually just finished reading the 4th book on Friday night, and so that's a fairly recent finish. But yeah, okay. So Bren, who just knows the books way better than me, it's action, adventure, STEM, tinge of romance with morals. Yeah, it's and that's a pretty good description of it. There is a lot of, it's a thriller. That's the other word used to describe the series. And I don't know why it works so well for me. Upon reread, I actually liked books 1 and 2 a lot more than on my first read through. Yeah, I think it's your book.
Oh, so the next book is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. This was such a really fun story. I think it was one of the first ones I read in this year, actually, it's going to be 2022. And I'd gotten a lot of Peter Pan influence in the past 2 years. So I'd read Dust by Carl Swanson. By this point, I'd read Shadow by Carl Swanson. In my own life, I'd done a performance that was Peter Pan based. And so I was very Peter Pan minded. And I realized I've never read the actual book. I mean, I've watched the movie. I've read these continuations of the tellings, and I have to know what the original Wonderland was written as. And I was surprised because the Disney movie is, does its Disney thing with stories, but It was a really, really great story. I loved it. It made me laugh so much, and I was very shocked at several points, just because of the brashness and the way that the author wrote things. But I loved it, and I kind of want to read it again soon, just because it's such a fun book.
That's another one that I need to read at some point.
Yeah, it's really great. I love seeing you really get to know the characters better in this than you do in definitely in the Disney movie, which is just a little bit overrated in my opinion.
JR says, happy birthday. Thanks, JR. After 3 years of BookTube, what YA book was your overall favorite?
You are jumping ahead of us here.
Yeah. let us get through our list, which I think we have one or two books left for both of us. So then we'll come back to this. Don't let us forget.
Cook was great. I agree, and definitely a different character in this book than in the retellings and in the film.
Okay, so the next book that I have. Do you have two more?
I have one more.
Okay. So I guess I'll just do one then. I thought I saw 4 books listed for you, and so.
Yeah, I only did 3 though. I followed the rules. I just had to write down 4.
Okay. Well, do you want to do your 4th? Because I have a 4th that I could also do.
Oh, so we're changing the rules mid-game?
How about we call it an honorable mention? Then it's legal.
Okay. I can do that.
We'll just ignore it.
I'm really confused. What are we doing? Just do your
next book. We're just doing one book.
Okay.
My next book. This is another one that I don't own physically. I listened to it on audio with Liam, actually. And that was Soldran's Garden, which is the first book in the Leoness trilogy. Soldran's Garden is not my favorite of the 3. That would be the 3rd one, which is Maduke. So the series is Soldran's Garden, usually actually retitled Leon, or just titled Leoness at this point. But it's Soldran's Garden is book 1, The Green Pearl is book 2, and Maduke is book 3. And Maduke is actually my favorite of the 3. But the experience of reading Soldran's Garden was funner than any of the other ones. And just part of why it was funner was because it was my first entry into this Arthurian adjacent story and world, and I loved the world that was set up. It was my first Jack Vance book that I'd read. It was kind of a lot of firsts for me, and just the experience of reading it was so fun, or listening to it was so fun. And I wasn't working at that point, so I was just doing stuff around the house, and I would just put it in and listen to it all day long as I was going about doing things. And it was just a great reading experience and a great world, very, very whimsical, rather dark and disturbing at times, but it's I don't know, I really, really enjoyed it. Margaret Pinard says, dropping in as I caught you live. Happy 3 years. Thank you for dropping in. Liam, of course, saw the Maduke hype already, but then he says Vance is wonderful, underappreciated these days, and I agree. I actually heard, who was it? It was on one of the Discords that I was that I'm a part of, and I was reading somebody talk about how there's a lot of authors who aren't mentioned or who aren't talked about nowadays, and I think I'm pretty sure Vance was one of them. But it was, I don't know. I think of the 3 Vance books that I read, which is the Leoness trilogy, I think he's a terrific author. Strange, weird, but that doesn't mean bad by any means. Kate?
Okay, so the last book we've got here is Coral by Sarah Ella. I saw that it was about mermaids, and I had a thing for mermaids, so I decided I wanted to read it. And I didn't realize the seriousness and the delicate things that Sarah Ella was going to be dealing with in this story. And it was one of the books that came at a very suitable time in my life, and I just appreciated it. It was helped me process things. It deals a lot. It's so fascinating. So I'm jumping around in my thoughts here, but it follows 2 stories, and you're wondering how they're connected the whole time. And it's not until the very end that you get to see it, and the author surprises you in the way that she connected the stories, and it's really, really fascinating. The characters are endearing and relatable, and it was just a really lovely story. And I think I don't typically write or highlight in her books or in books in general, but I underlined several lines in this book because they were very impressionable. And yes, her cover reveal for the sequel to the Wonderland Trials comes out very soon, which I'm excited about. Sarah Ella. I've only read Coral and Wonderland Trials by her, and I feel like she's published several more books than these. But if I'm not confusing her with someone else. But anyhow,
I think
I like
you're
what
right.
I've read of her so far.
Okay, so those are the 9 books, or the 3 books from each of the past 3 years that we have read. That we are our top 3 books of the past 3 years, each of the past 3 years. That's how it's titled. Yeah.
Now would be a good time to jump back to Bryn's question.
Yeah. So where was it at? After 3 years of BookTube, what YA book was your overall favorite? And I'll have to look back through my list.
I'm going to avoid scrolling through those notes on my phone because they were a hassle to find earlier. So I'm just going to base my decision off of the books I can see and the books I have here. And so here's a clarification for the question. Is a question to you, maybe you can decide this. Are we including up till today, like within the past 3 months as well, or just in?
Yeah.
So because I know we
say
pulled
yes
these books.
Because we started on March 16th. And so anything between March 16th, 2020 and March 16th, 2023. That's what we're going with. Okay. If that works for you.
That just makes it more difficult, but that's okay. So I love YA books. I love certain YA books, but I get distracted by the comments, guys. I'm sorry. But the books I've read most recently are the ones that come to my mind, and so I like them the most because I can remember them the most. So I might just exclude the past 3 months so that I can focus on the ones that really stood out to me, and those would be Dust by Cara Swanson, because I love that one to death. I'll also say Vivid by Ashley Bustamante was really good, and yeah, I think those are some of my top 2s. I really like a lot of books. Oh, The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. It's a really good one. I love that one. So, a couple different options for you all, I guess. What do you got, T?
Oh, I didn't realize how many I'd read.
Yeah.
I'll pick one from each. I'll pick one from each year. That'll make it simpler for me. So I think for 2020, I will go with where did it go? Gathering Blue by Lois Lowry, which I already mentioned here earlier in the video. I think it's my favorite of the 4 Giver books, and as much as I love The Giver, Gathering Blue just resonated with me on a whole different level. For 2021, I am going to go with North or Be Eaten, which is the second book in the Wingfeather saga. Book 1 is On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness, which I really enjoyed, book 1, but book 2 I enjoyed way more. The stakes seemed way, way higher. The level of storytelling in book 2 felt better and stronger, in my opinion. So that's what I'll go for 2021. And then 2022, I will say
Activated.
Activated is a great choice, but yeah, I mean it's the true answer. So that's what I'd have to go with. I will also, since I've already talked about Activated in this video, though, I will mention what's it called? The Winter King by Christine Cohen. This is not the same Winter King as is written by Bernard Cornwell. The Winter King is a YA story, fantasy story about a girl set, and it's in a winter land, and just the winters are very, very harsh. It's got some really creepy things in the background that you don't actually see. It plays with, it's like a mythology, a fairy tale in many ways, and I really enjoyed a lot of aspects about it. It's not my favorite book that I've ever read, and I'm not the target audience. But for me not being the target audience, and for me not loving the writing style, it worked really well, and I liked a lot of what was going on in it. So that's the third one that I'll mention, since I already talked about Calculated or Activated. I mean, let's see, we've got some comments here.
That's just entirely too difficult of a question, Bryn. That's like, what's your favorite book? I'm like, well.
So Derek and I just finished reading Sun, which is the fourth book in the Giver Quartet together, and so we've been talking about it and had a lot of discussion, and so that was really, really fun. I'm bummed that I missed you talking about the Giver, though. I'll have to catch the replay for that. Yeah, I actually talked. Did I talk about the Giver, or did I talk about Gathering Blue? I think I talked about Gathering Blue mostly for that one.
I mean,
but I did talk about the series as a whole, the quartet as a whole too. JR says, "Is there a book that was really hyped that when you read it you felt like I can't be the only one that didn't like it?" Ooh, that's a good question. I
had a minute to think about this, and my answer for the question is The Count of Monte Cristo, which is a very unpopular opinion in most situations, but I was just frustrated by the theme of the whole story and the motivation of the main character being revenge, and that that's not a healthy thing. And it's just, I mean, I understand that the story was very artfully crafted and the way that things tied together was admirable, but I didn't like the story because I don't love following a character who's motivated by revenge. Just blown out of proportion for the wrong done him. You should have forgiven them. But aside from that, that's the first one that really stands out to me. I'm sure there's been other books, but that's one of the ones that stood out to me. T and I read it at the same time, so.
So I've got a couple answers. Most of them are not, I didn't like this book. Most of them are, this is way overhyped. One of those is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I liked Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but it was not my favorite. Another one would be actually Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 3 of Stormlight. And again, I like the book, but it's not my favorite. And it's definitely, in my opinion, not the best of the Stormlight books, like so many people hold it to be. And then the only other one that I am going to mention is I'll actually mention, what's it called? It's the third, I think it's the third book in the series, and that's the Ranger's Apprentice series. The Icebound Land. The Icebound Land is book 3, I think. And I did not like it. I finished it, and it almost put me into a reading slump, and I don't get into reading slumps. And it was just oh my goodness, this book. So that was the one that almost did it for me. Olive Watt, actually. Yeah, Liam, you're not wrong. I loved the first book, but books 2 and 3 have been hard, and I've been reading book 4 for almost a year and haven't made it through it. So yeah, you're not wrong there.
If we're spanning wide varieties to like all of Wheel of Time, or I would also say like all modern romance novels, every single one I've read that is so hyped is so trash. So that's a vague answer though.
Revenge is the only answer though. Just finished Fable by Adrian Young. It was not worth the hype. I heard about it. I liked some things about it, but it wasn't my cup of tea. That's the one with about the daughter who's on the boat with her dad or something like that, and the cover's got like half of her face on it, something like that. I think. Yeah, I don't know. You're the first person who hasn't liked it, that I've heard about. So I'll have to. I've thought about reading that for myself. We will see now. JR says, I have a handful, but Frankenstein comes to mind. Ooh, I know Kate loved Frankenstein.
So
I haven't read it yet. I need to. That's one of the ones that I really need to. Liam's still on about what? Wheel of Time. The spicy takes, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, here's another one, which is not as an extreme of a, in my opinion, but I didn't love Aragon, and it's such a well-loved story in fantasy. I read Aragon and I read Eldest, but just not up to the hype in my expectation. I really wanted to like him too, but
there's another book in that series coming out.
Yeah, there's several I haven't read in the series still, but
yeah, I'll get to those eventually. Steve, I'm reading something called The Return of the King. The author has real potential. Yeah, if only he wasn't already dead. The cover of Fable is cool, but the story and characters are a bit shallow. That's unfortunate. I don't know. Yeah, let's see. JR talking about after the third Malazan, I had to step away from 700 plus page books for a while. Yeah, I get that. I mean, I love epic fantasy. I love all the huge stories and everything, but sometimes it gets a bit much, and I've got a lot left. I'm currently reading my current series. I put Wheel of Time aside until I can feel like I can get back to it. But my current big epic fantasy series is The Runelords by David Farland, and I'm very, very much loving it. I actually have the first book out. That's I love the covers. They're what's the artist's name? Daryl K. Sweet, and he does phenomenal cover art for these ones, especially the back cover on this first book. It's just the colors and everything, so nice. But I'm loving the series, and they're not 700 pages. They are 450 is book one. I think they get a little bit longer, but no, I totally understand having to take a break from it. Brent hasn't read any Aragon. J.R. Frankenstein was beautifully written. It's like reading poetry, but the story's kind of dry.
Frankenstein is that I feel like this is slight spoilers, but if you know like the vague idea of Frankenstein, it's not spoilers. Frankenstein, the dealing with the humanity and seeing the humanity of the monster that was created, this monster of Dr. Frankenstein's, and paralleling that to Dr. Frankenstein and the monster he was becoming because he created this unnatural thing. The way that those clashed and combined was so fascinating. And I don't know, it was such a beautiful, that's not the right word. It was such a fascinating look on human nature.
So right now in the film industry, there's rumors of I think it's actually, the movie is confirmed to be made, and it's a Frankenstein adaptation. And I think there's rumors that Andrew Garfield is attached to a role in it. And I could see him as Dr. Frankenstein. And I don't know why, because I've never read the book, but he's, I don't know. For some reason and I don't know if that's who it is or anything. It just, if I don't even know if it's live action, because I think it's Guillermo del Toro, and he just did Pinocchio in stop motion. And so he might be doing Frankenstein in stop motion as well, but I don't know. But
I don't know if a film of Frankenstein could ever be as good as a book. I haven't watched any yet, but the book is so good. I think it would be hard to replicate in a different medium.
Yeah. Still need to read book 2 of Runelords. Yeah, I need to actually get to book 4. So I'm reading the series with Nico from Nico's Book Reviews, and Liam read the first book with us in December, and then he hasn't continued on with the series yet. But I've been really enjoying reading it and being able to discuss it with Nico. That's been super fun, and I'd love to hear Liam's thoughts as if he ever continues with it. Derek says, I never read Aragon either. Yeah, it's one of those
common for no one to have, or for a few people to have not read it yet.
I think so. Punk rock cereal bowl. Yep, the classic 90s fantasy art is great. Talking about the Runelords cover, I agree. I don't know why that people don't have, and I guess they do actually. There's been some amazing cover art recently, especially in the self-pub community. I've loved some of what I've been seeing from that. I have not watched I, Frankenstein. My brothers both watched it, and they weren't in I think I wasn't old enough, and I think they watched it when they were down in a different city. So it's kind of like, oh well, but maybe someday I will. Steve Donahue. Last week I read a book called The Fellowship of the Ring, a sequel to Lord of the Rings, right there on Amazon for $27, even though Tolkien is still copyrighted. Okay. All right. I'm not sure what he's saying there. I think he's still on about how Tolkien, that author has real potential. Any Gilbert Morris, specifically the Seven Sleeper series? I have not read it. I don't think I've heard of the author either. Maybe if I knew what the book one was titled, I would. But I haven't read it. I Frankenstein was a hot mess, but a great choice for if you were drunk or just running a fever. Okay, that's all right. Yeah. So, do we have anything else we want to talk about on this
I think
celebration?
we pretty much summed everything up. We've got through all of these wonderful stories.
We live in Alaska, and it's only sunny out right now because it's sunset. Sun's going down, and actually,
but it's really warm today. It was like what, 40 above?
36, a balmy 36 degrees. Yeah.
Yeah, we were out
warm for
basking in the
Alaska.
sun. It was lovely.
I love it here, but it does get cold, and I'm on the second story, and the sun's setting right at eye level right now, so it's just shining right on me, but that's all right.
Well,
I think it's a real book. I'm assuming the author is going to get sued into oblivion. Yeah. Oh, The Fellowship of the King. I see. Let me. Last week, I read a book called The Fellowship of the King, a sequel to Lord of the Rings. Interesting. Oh, yeah, I misread it. I saw the K as an R, but interesting. Yeah, I sure hope he got sued. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, but I mean, like, yeah,
Matt, we're an hour ahead of California. We have our very own time zone. So
yeah, we do. We're an hour behind.
I guess I don't know if. Yeah, California does daylight savings time, so yeah.
Yeah.
And our sun's setting, so it'll be dark and
we're an hour behind, and the sun. We're just getting more and more sunlight. In about 2 months, we won't get any darkness again. It'll just be all sunlight for until about September. We'll start getting be actually gaining darkness, and we'll get it'll get nighttime again. But it's interesting. It's interesting living here, but it's really nice. Summers in Alaska are amazing, but there's no time like Alaska time. Sure. I mean, we do have our own, so yeah, I guess that's right. But yeah,
all the adopted states.
This is true. Alaska very much so is a world of its own, unless you go to Anchorage, and then that's just Upper Seattle. So
yeah.
But no, it's amazing up here. We don't have big cities other than Anchorage. And
Juneau and Anchorage are the big ones.
Yeah. But it's not massive. The state is massive, but the cities aren't, and it's really nice. I hate Anchorage. I hate going to Anchorage. I mean, I don't hate Anchorage, but I just don't like being there and driving around and dealing with Anchoragites and stuff. And it's a different culture in Anchorage than it is here, and that's all right.
Because why?
I don't know. It's got more of a big city.
Are you saying mentality? Yeah, that's what.
It's got more of a big city mentality. The rest of Alaska is rural, and it gets. I mean, you go out to the villages, and it's even less. It's not the same as. It's even more different, I guess, is how I should word it. But it's. I don't know. I'm not a big city person. Not a farm boy. as much as I'd like to be. But Anchorage has a large homeless population, and the buildings are very old. Yeah, that's true. They do have used bookshops.
We have one used bookshop.
Yeah, and we have a Barnes and Noble and one used bookshop, and that's about it.
And a thrift store. So
there's a thrift store.
We actually have a couple thrift stores.
But it's good. It's nice up here. All right. I think we will call it there unless anybody has any last minute questions. But thank you guys all for showing up and for celebrating this 3rd year anniversary with us. It's been a good 3 years. Lot of work that we've put into it, and a lot less work than we could have put into it, especially on the video editing side and production. But we also have to do what we have time to do, and that's what happens. I've put out a lot more videos in this year already than I have in the first 3 months of the years, because I've been doing this read along with Steve and David Wiley for The Lord of the Rings, and how it doing the talks, discussing the videos on it. My brain's shutting off. I think we should end it before my brain ends.
Yeah, he's like he said, he's done too many videos this year. He's running, his words hit their limit. It's like, those story ideas where people can only say a certain amount of words. Well, he found his. He used all his words up, guys. He'll catch him again for the next video. He'll find them again. They can recharge.
Both Mondays videos are scheduled. One is a review. What is it a review for? Blinding Knife? No, not The Blinding Knife. The Broken Eye by Brent Weeks, which is the 3rd book in the Lightbringer series. That's my Monday. That's my review for Monday. And then I've also got my discussion thoughts for Return of the King chapters 6 through 10. That'll go up tomorrow as well. And then I won't have anything until Thursday. I will have a Tolkien book. It's a rating my Tolkien book covers, I think is what it's going to be titled. I haven't edited it yet, and that's an issue because it's going to take some editing. And then Saturday, the 25th, is Tolkien Reading Day. And so I have a video that will be going up on that about who is Tom Bombadil. And so, yeah. Anyways, lots of Tolkien this week. That's all right. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. We will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.